The U.S. Federal Reserve left its key interest rate as it is for the third straight time on Wednesday. According to the Fed chief, Trump's tariff threat has had a snowball effect, but not to the point that it's pounding the U.S. economy just yet. Let's turn to Professor Kim Yong-jin for more. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. So the rate freeze was not too much of a surprise, was it?
Right. It is not. Actually, even though the President Trump has been making increasingly urgent calls for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rate, the Fed has decided to keep the interest rate as it is, as you mentioned. And there are two reasons for this freeze of the rate. The first is the outlook on inflation. The latest consumer inflation report saw a 2.4% year-over-year rise in March, which is above the Fed 2% target. However, it is still rather low compared to what could come. The one-year outlook compiled by the University of Michigan stands at 6.5%. The main driver of the jump in inflation expectation is, President Trump's tariff policy, which is projected to raise cost of consumers. The second are the numbers that shows the stability of U.S. economy. The latest macroeconomic figures have continued to hold up, and in some cases look relatively strong. A surprisingly positive April non-farm payroll report issued in the last Friday boosted investor confidence and pushed the stocks higher. In other words, market is not indicating that a recession is imminent.
So is that where Powell's confidence that the U.S. economy is okay coming from? Because I do have to point out U.S. GDP in the first quarter of this year did contract 0.3%. Where is this confidence coming from?
Right. Yes, as you mentioned, the real GDP of the U.S. decreased at an annual rate of 0.3% in the first quarter. In the fourth quarter of 2024, real GDP increased 2.4%. When we see the numbers, it looks like the U.S. economy might be in a bad shape. However, when looking at the numbers in the investment, consumer spending, and export, you may understand, Powell's confidence. The decrease in real GDP in the first quarter primarily reflected an increase in import, which are a subtraction in the calculation of GDP, and a decrease in government spending. The Trump government, reduced its government spending for the efficiency. These, movement were partly offset by increases in investment, consumer spending, and export. The sum of consumer spending and gross private fixed investment increased to 3.3% in the first quarter, compared with an increase of 2.9% in the fourth quarter. The price index for the gross domestic purchase increased 3.4% in the first quarter, and compared with an increase in 2.2% in the fourth quarter. The personal consumption expenditures, price index increased 3.6% compared with an increase of 2.2%. All, numbers are very good.
Right. Well, numbers are indicating the U.S. economy is okay for now. But when will a rate cut take place then, according to Powell?
Well, in my humble opinion, it won't be soon. We'll see the Trump tariff policy to take effect in like a 6-month period. So probably the Fed will be able to make a move around September this year. So that means, the fourth quarter, right? If the negative effect of tariff policy take effect, the inflation will take off and the economic growth will stall. Probably recession will start. This scenario effectively paralyzed the Fed, which can't respond to both problems at once. In this situation, Fed, need to make decisions on where to go. So at the point, Fed will make, the rate cut, to boost up economic growth at the cost of inflation.
Well, Professor Kim, all these economic uncertainties are stemming from tariffs, reckless tariff push. Now, first official talks between the U.S. and China on trade are taking place this weekend. Now, will anything tangible come out of the talks this time, or will it be more like a warm-up?
Wow, that will be like kind of gloomy to me.
Pre-game.
According to U.S. Treasury Department, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is heading to Switzerland on May today, right? Where he will meet a top business, representative from China. But China's Commerce Ministry said that any dialogue must be based on mutual respect and equality, and added that a negotiated solution is only possible if the U.S. acknowledges the impact of its tariff measures and correct its erroneous practice. It's a quite strong statement.
Indeed.
Considering this statement of Chinese Commerce Ministry, the talk between two countries won't result in tangible outcomes soon. And also, it is very clear when we look at the statement of the Secretary Bessent, I quote, "My sense is this will be about de-escalation, not a big trade deal. We need to de-escalate before we can move forward." So this might be just warm-up.
Well, maybe nothing too fruitful, but they did manage to put themselves in one room for now.
Yeah, that's
Professor
right.
Kim, before I let you go, Trump threatened to impose tariffs on all foreign-made films and pharmaceuticals. Where is this tariff threat coming from when we thought he was taking a break from them?
Well, I'm not sure, what are the goals of Mr. Trump, want to achieve through tariff policy and how long, the tariff policy lasts. However, I understand why he's using the tariff. Let's look at that, tact he said. Trump said tariff will encourage U.S. consumers to buy more American-made goods, increase the amount of tax raised, and lead to huge levels of investment. This is very optimistic about tariff policy. He also argued that America has been taken advantage of by cheaters and pillaged by foreigners. By using the tariff policy, he wants to achieve, some of the goals, like blocking illegal immigrants, and illegal drugs, from reaching the U.S. We see around September, when the actual negative effect of tariff, take place. Then, how Mr. Trump maneuver that situation. And he might give a break to the world around that time.
All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for connecting with us. You have a wonderful day.
Thanks for having me.